Welcome to Mindful Live. What number are we on now? 73? Mindful Live 73. Welcome to Mindful Live 73. It is the 10th of May in the year of our Lord 2022 in 2022 CE. And I am your host, Nathan Springer. Welcome. Nice to have you here. Well, today, most of the news, most of the information coming out seems to have been focused around this tragedy in our country. The tragedy of the young boy Kimani, who went missing yesterday and was found today and was not found alive. Tragedy. And the nature, good night Jade Bean, and the nature of these tragedies is very quickly you want to get someone to blame. And it's understandable. It's just how we work. You hear about this, you hear this really tragic thing, and someone has to be blamed for it. Someone is at fault. But I think in some cases, in this case especially, goodnight Blue Zabuka, many people may be a little too quick to find a scapegoat. People are blaming the neighbor who spotted the child. People are blaming the mother who is currently grieving. And I think it's just not something that you should be putting into a blame perspective right now. The thing with this, the contemplation I made today, let's start with the contemplation I made today. And I was speaking about how the human mind works. The nature of the human mind is we are really good at recognizing patterns, finishing the pattern, filling in the blanks. We are really good at that, filling in the blanks. So when our eyes look at things, this is a pretty common thing if you've heard about some biology. And the way your eye sees is like, as it were, pictures you're seeing, and your brain is putting it all together and giving you this smooth vision of this smooth image of what you're seeing. While what is actually there might not necessarily be what your brain represents. Your brain is literally filling in the blanks. So that's why you could hallucinate. That's why you could miss seeing things. Something could be there sitting in a corner watching you for half hour and you don't know. And as far as your brain sees, the room is empty. So yeah, your brain is what sees. So there's that. And I think because of that, to draw it back to this whole thing, because of that, it's so easy sometimes to have limited information and be sure that we could figure out exactly what happened and what transpired. And I actually don't think that is possible. I think there is reality, there's objective truth, there is what happened, and what happened is a factual matter. But especially when you're dealing with matters like this, where for one, the information is very sketchy. Very few people know exactly what happened in certain in-between times. It's this person's word and this person's word, and they aren't even sure exactly what happened at what time, etc. To jump in that to attempt to place a sure blame on any one person, I think is a very, very dangerous and possibly cruel thing to do. I am sorry, I'm working on my laptop while listening. Good night, Flo, Christopher. Story is confusing. I agree, Fab Khalifa. I agree. The story is confusing. And let's get into a bit of the story. And what we could glean from this. Body of 2-year-old found. And that's pretty straightforward. The body was found around 11 a.m. today, close to midday. He was found in the same river that they were searching in him with. They were searching for him in for the longest while. He was found just in the same river where they were afraid that they would find him since yesterday. King James says, let's wait for the autopsy report because what is happening now is a media overload. And that is precisely what I'm talking about now. I understand the irony of talking about a media overload, and I'm putting more media out there about the very same incident. But I am attempting, hopefully, to try to bring some nuance into it. To try to not drop an axe and cut on one side or the other before we even know the full reality of the situation. And I think when you actually read about some of these things, everybody turned detective on social media as if they were the people involved. When you read about some of the facts in the matter, you get that exact picture. The story, as someone rightfully said, is kind of confusing. And when it's confusing, we are very tempted. We are very tempted to use our natural ability to fill in the blanks. And I mean, I understand because I myself would have fallen prey to that. But I think the key is to reserve your final conclusive judgment. Now, no one is saying that you can't have something to say on a current issue. That's obvious. Everyone has something to say on a current issue, and no one can blame you for having an opinion on a current issue. But when you attempt to make it seem like you have found the conclusion, then I think we fall into dangerous territory. And that's where the contemplation was going today. We are really good at filling in the blanks, and then from filling in the blanks, we think we have a complete picture, and we take that complete picture that our brain tells us we have, and we'd use that to draw a conclusion from. And we'd say, okay, look at this complete picture we have, and because we have this complete picture, we know that the earth is actually flat. And that's how we figure this out, because we have the complete picture. And it does not work like that, because very often we do not have the complete picture. Now, to get a little political, this is exactly the problem with collectivist systems like communism, like socialism. Those who look at enough of my lives know I don't really like a lot of them. And this is part of the problem with it, because when you have one group of people centrally controlling everything, you have one government centrally planning the entire economy. The problem is they don't know everything. We never know everything. So even if we think we know the most about a situation, very likely we'd be missing a certain piece that someone else might have. And that's why when we attempt to draw conclusions on certain situations, you very often get yourself in trouble. And I think something like this is a prime situation like that. This is the article from since yesterday. Where is Kimani? Massive hunt for missing 2-year-old. And this is to get some of the story and some of the context. A massive land, air and water search was launched and continued last night for 2-year-old Kimani Francis, who went missing after he wandered off from his Teshia village, Point 14 home yesterday morning. Guardian Media was told by search teams that baby Kimani was only wearing pampers and was barefooted, was last seen running in the direction of a bridge about a quarter mile away from his 10th Street extension home. Now, I think that first piece of the story, and to add to the social media investigators out there, I think that first piece of the story might have actually been near the end of the story also, if you understand what I'm saying. If you listen to most of the accounts, he was seen running towards a bridge over a river that he was eventually found in. Now, many people are attempting to blame or pushing a lot of blame on the neighbor, because a neighbor reportedly saw the boy. She was the one who saw the little child, the baby, toddler, running, crossing across her yard, and she called the police. And everyone is saying, why didn't she grab the child? And to be very honest, when I heard just the snippet of this story, I wondered the same. But I didn't blast out my wondering of the scene because I just didn't know. But I wondered that, to me, if I am sitting in my yard and I see a little boy in Pampers, bareback and barefoot, running up the road, I was going to grab him and hold him there and hold him till someone else comes. And I'm thinking, but why did this lady not do this very thing? What happened there? And then I listened to the live where she gave her story, and I could understand the story that she said. As I'm continuing to say, I draw no conclusions in the matter because I do not know all the facts of the matter. I would keep saying that. But I can understand the story that she told. She said she looked out, she saw the child, and the key part of this story to understanding the context of it is that her house is a distance away from the road. And in her story, she said, when she saw the child, he was already passing her house. She went inside, turned off her pot, woke up, shook up, however, stirred her husband and told him she just saw a child in the road. He said, and I find this sounds like a kind of very Trini man thing to say, and in the long run, when we know the conclusion of the story, it sounds tragic that it is such a Trini male thing to seem kind of despondent about the whole situation. He said that an adult must be somewhere around and, as it were, throwing it off. The lady said she didn't take that for an answer. She picked up her phone and started calling the police. Now, this is the lady that initially made the report of the missing child, as far as I can tell from all the stories I've read so far. So she called the police about this situation first. And while calling the police, she's making her way out of her house, up her yard, which has some distance to the road. And the lady is a lady of some girth who has apparently a leg injury. So she was not making progress very swiftly. She was on the phone with the police, iterating what happened. The police told her keep following the child. She said she kept following the child. Apparently, the young lad that has unfortunately died, apparently he had some pep in his step. He outran the lady. According to her story, by the time she turned the corner, he was gone. She could not have kept up. She could not have gotten to him. And in that, hindsight is 2020. Looking back, you could always see what exactly you could have done that would have made this situation turn out perfectly and understandable. But to me, you can't look back and think of things in what would be the perfect step to make sure this works. I think you look back and think of things in what would be the realistic step in how things would work. How would this realistically turn out? And is this something that is unreasonable in the general understanding of things? If you look outside and you see a little boy running in the road, and apparently the husband is inside sleeping or something, turning off your pot first isn't an outrageous thing to think about. If the man is sleeping inside, you have to follow the child. Turning off the pot makes sense. The husband should have come out too. That's kind of what I was saying. To me, and I'm trying my best not to try to put anything so conclusive in it, but to me, as far as all the story goes, that husband probably has the most guilt to feel now. He does not, as far as I can tell. Again, I don't know all the facts, but as far as I can tell, he does not necessarily have any blame to take. But in looking back on it, if you are to feel guilty, and the reality is knowing how many women are and seeing how this situation is, I think all the people that were involved in this would have a lot of guilt to go around. Too much. But he may have some genuine guilt to feel to some extent, because you could have gotten up and probably run out. Right. But turning off the pot, going inside, that isn't an unreasonable thing to think about. that the person would turn around, turn off the pot first, and then go outside on the phone with the police. You're not necessarily thinking this little boy is going to run up the road, and you're already following him. It all sounds reasonable to me. And a toddler who has the mechanics of running good can move swiftly. And to me, that's the next part, even on the mother's side. That I think some people need to be reasonable in our understanding of reality. These things do happen. It is not unheard of. A toddler who can run can disappear in a very short period of time. Can disappear very quickly. And it doesn't take long for them to just disappear from your sight. And if you're being honest as a parent, a guardian, very often you would have not paid attention for 5 minutes while you were with a toddler. They can be swift. That is reality. And now, that being reality means that is why we are extra careful with toddlers. That's why such an alarm is raised whenever a toddler goes missing, because we all understand this reality. And that's where the whole community raising the child and all of that comes in. Everyone pays vigilant attention to that. I have nephews, and if I am in our family home and I'm downstairs and I just hear the tiny footsteps running past me somewhere, I'm going to look out to see where they are going. Who knows where they are going, because they are sporadic little creatures. I have a nephew who once ran out saying some yellow man is calling him across the road. Now, that was some creepy stuff. Children could be very, very creepy. And they could be very slippery. And one little lapse and it can happen. Now, that's exactly why everyone, especially the older people, when you hear them talk, they always warn you about those lapses, and they overwarn because everyone understands this could be the reality. But I think on the flip side, while you do have the warnings and you are supposed to be extra careful, you have to have the understanding that these things happen. And tragedies are not the same as malevolence or cruelty or evil acts. A tragedy is a tragedy. It's misfortune. It's the misfortune of life. It's the woes of life. It's the difficulties of life. It happens. It's the nature of this world that we reside in. And as much as the human tendency is to want to find someone to blame, oftentimes in tragedy, it's just that, a tragedy. Now, I think when you listen to what a lot of the hunters were saying, you understand that the irony of this, the sad irony of it might be that even in all the shoulda, couldas, and wouldas, maybe after the child left the mother's home, maybe the reality might have been that nothing could have been done by that time. It's the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I like that. Where's that from? I like that. And yeah, when you listen to what the way how the story progressed, from the neighbor, the child was running. Apparently, some people cutting grass. Ravi Ramratan from Extreme Hunters said they mobilized us as they found out and started searching the rivers in the community. He said 2 men cutting grass in the area also saw the child running in the direction of the bridge, which is why they were combing the river and surrounding areas. So the neighbor, the men cutting grass, they all said that this child was seen running towards that bridge. The hunters from the very beginning were searching for him in the river. And his statement was, we're hopeful that we don't get him in the river. Unfortunately, in the long run, we now know that hope was lost. Ren Gopi Singh, who was in the river searching for Kimani, said they were flooded with calls about the child's disappearance. He said they were told the child loves water, but they were remaining positive that he will be found. The child is 2 years old. He have on him pampers, no shoes, no slippers. The pitch going to be real hot. The bridge is made of iron, so it is going to be difficult for him to cross. He might see water and he might want to dip his foot into water. He added that when the child disappeared, the tide would have been high and the water would have been traveling downstream. Gopi Singh assured they would not search until they find him. We will stay until we get closure, the full team out. If you listen to what the hunters were saying, how they were saying it, we will stay until we get closure. We're hopeful that we don't get him in the river. They're explaining that they were told the young boy likes water. The pitch is hot, he would not remain on the road. The bridge is very difficult for a 2-year-old to cross, so it's unlikely he crossed the bridge. The tide was high and the water was faster moving. There are lots of things adding up in one particular direction. And as I was saying before, when you look at a lot of these facts, it could seem like the unfortunate irony is even with the shoulda, coulda, woulda, from the moment the child left his mother's home, the tragedy may have already, well, the tragedy did happen. But even with the shouldas and couldas, it may have already been sealed. Also, the child is not the neighbor's responsibility. That is correct. But honestly, I think that statement is irrelevant in this. I honestly think that is irrelevant. I don't even think the neighbor would use that as her excuse. I don't think the neighbor is sitting consoling herself thinking, well, the child was never my responsibility. The only consolation to her is that she could not have reached the child. That is the consolation. That she did what was reasonable in her book and she still could not have reached the child. That is the consolation. I don't think the neighbor is consoling herself wondering whose responsibility it was. I think if she could have reached the child, she would have thought it her responsibility to reach it. It's obvious that she did think it that way. If she went in and turned off her pot, she stopped what she was doing, granted, called the police, granted, disrupted her day, walked out the road, attempted to follow the child. Obviously, she thought it was her responsibility to stop this child. So I don't actually think that statement is realistic in even how she thinks about it. I don't think she thinks about it that way. Her actions tell that she believed she was responsible to try to stop the child. It's just that she couldn't reach the child in time. And I'm thinking about it reasonably, and I don't see why someone would follow the child with the intention of not trying to reach the child. I just don't see that. And for people to not even fully see, understand, know what has happened and transpired through the entire incident, and then to go onto social media and put some of these things permanently out there, I think is very reckless. It's very reckless. It's very reckless. We are good at filling in the blanks. We could see when things add up. We could see certain things seem to line up in a certain direction. Fine. But to just attempt to draw a final conclusion on people who very likely would already be distraught over the situation, I think that is cruel. I think that is very cruel. Yeah. A lot of inaction from the mother's lack of care to people seeing and not being able to hold him led to his demise. But that's the thing I'm saying. Hindsight is 2020. It's like doing a puzzle. I really liked puzzles as a little child. You know, those maze puzzles where you have the start and you have a little dead end there and a dead end there and you have to make your way to the end. I really like them. I like drawing them. That was my favorite doodle at the back. My favorite doodle at the back of all my books. Some of my books had more doodles than writing. And the thing with a lot of those puzzles, they're easy to cheat when you start from the finish line. If you start from the finish and look backward going through the maze, then it's easy to say, well, yeah, this is how it should have been done, and why didn't you just take the left turn, and why didn't you just, and you could have leave the pot on the fire, and you could have tell your husband turn off the pot, and you could have, and it 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 could have, and yeah, that is true, but that's not actually how we process things. We process things going forward. We don't know what is going to happen at the end of what we are processing. We are processing it in the moment. All you could judge it on is what is reasonable to a person. And to me, if something sounds reasonable, then how can I draw a negative conclusion on something unless I have evidence to prove that it was not actually reasonable? It's easy to say in hindsight that this and this and this was the perfect thing. Now, I am saying all of this before I go down to some of what the mother said, because I think there is some difficulty in this. Where is that statement where the mother was initially asked about it? And she said what she was doing at the moment. All right. Councillor Harris. Describing the right. She spoke so describing the situation as heart-wrenching, point quoting Mayor Salima Thomas. Said she had 3 children, and as a mother, she was still trying to process what was happening. Now, this one I saw all over the internet, a lot of mothers, and I understand that totally. A lot of mothers were extremely distraught about this, because this is the point in a child's life where it's mother heavy, that mother nurturing, caring bit, and mothers feeling that. They would be feeling the mashup, as it were, for that. Understood totally. She spoke to the child's mother over the phone. Kimani's mother told her that her son was at home having a fruit while she was doing some work on her mobile phone. Thomas said an aunt would have left the house, so she is assuming with the door opening, it probably was left open, giving the child access to walk out. This is just based on a conversation with the mom. I don't have concrete evidence of that. Yeah. And that bit there, I think, is... I am not talking about blame here. I don't know how many times I could explain that and say that over and over and over. I'm not talking about blame here. But that bit, I think, is the cautionary tale in it. That bit right there. The distraction. And modern life has brought more and more things into this distraction, into the position to be able to distract us from these things. More and more things. And it could seem like everything else is always so important and everything else must be taken care of at this very moment. But as we see, there are very often things more important than what might seem urgent at the moment. Doing work on the mobile phone in hindsight, as we're looking at everything here in hindsight, doing work on the mobile phone, I'm sure to the mother now in hindsight, whatever work was being done on the mobile phone, she would be thinking, I could have cared less. I could not have cared less. Whatever it was. That part about the door being left open is very plausible. So the aunt left the door open knowing there's a toddler in the house. It happens. I remember in our house when nephews, well, for my parents' grandchildren started to come, we had barriers at every exit. And even in between, and we had movable barriers, so you could block each doorway and block this corridor and herd them in, because we literally treated them like sheep for quite a bit. And that's because they kind of behave like sheep. They will walk into a ditch. So that was our solution, because some people do forget the door open. The door open, and you hear the old people saying you grew up in a cave or what, or something like that, because some people just have that habit of forgetting the door open. And that's why so many people have those barriers built up by their doors, because doors are forgotten open sometimes. And if left open, very often toddlers go bolting out. And to me, this situation, when you look at all this evidence and all the statements coming from so many different people, this situation shows the reality of how many moving parts go into a tragedy like this. And why it's so difficult to really try to point one person and say that's who you blame for it. Now, there is responsibility, and there would be who is responsible, and that's a whole other matter. But in terms of blame and blaming someone for it, when you look at so many moving parts in it, the aunt who left the door open, the mother who was distracted on the phone, the neighbor who couldn't get out in time, the husband who wasn't bothered to get up, the people who were cutting grass who couldn't stop cutting grass apparently, the hunters who just didn't reach where they reached in time, or the little boy who probably was just too stubborn and he was told so many times, and by that age he should be listening a little more. You could call blame on anyone you want to in the whole line. How long did it take for the mother to realize the child missing? That's a whole other issue too. I don't know. The story could nearly seem like if the police drew attention to it. I do not know. It could have been that the mother saw the child missing and was looking for him around the house in the meantime. I do not know. And that's the whole idea about it. There are so many parts of it you just don't know. So to call blame on someone who is surely grieving over that when you don't even have the evidence, I find that just nah. All right. I actually have another story, I installed a latch at the top. I caught her with an umbrella opening the latch to get out. Wow. The law will hold the mother responsible. A whole chain of events, but very sad outcome. Very true. Extremely sad outcome. That's it in the end. In the end, all reports say it's the police who alerted her. The end of it is a very sad outcome. The child lost. But I think even while watching this situation and another situation that came up recently, you see some people speak about very often like Trinidad going to the dogs, and this is proof of how horrible it is, and look, even the children dying and da. And to me, I understand that statement. I understand that this is a horrible thing. This is a horrible tragedy. It feels like it heavy the whole nation, but I think to me, that still tells something about the nation. The fact that one little 2-year-old boy that 99% of the country had no idea existed before yesterday, that one little 2-year-old boy, quite down in point, he was able to, as it were, heavy the whole nation. The entire nation was worried about that one little boy. People left what they were doing all from far and wide to go and try to find that one little boy. And I think as tragic as the story is, looking at some of the reaction still actually tells something positive about our country. For example, even adding to that, the very disgusting incident of whoever cooked the corned beef inside of the Hindu temple. Like, totally senseless. I just don't get it. But even still, to me, I don't think that is symptomatic of Trinidad and Tobago. When you look at the response to that, I think it's more symptomatic of Trinidad and Tobago. it's more symptomatic of Trinidad and Tobago when you look at the responses to these matters. How we see ourselves, how we see our own societies. What you mean, quite in point? Well, quite in point, I think Trinidad understands when we say quite in point what we mean. The only people that don't understand that are the people who live quite in point too. Everywhere in Trinidad is quite to somebody. That is true. That is true. That is true. But it's just the reality that point is quite to a lot more people. I was never unfamiliar with South Trinidad. I grew up in and around Central. But I always remember that I had a better understanding when you're going to Point and going down to the beaches down south, a better understanding that there's south and then there's south. Like when someone tells you that Sando is south, you're going south and you're going San Fernando. You could not get the proper understanding that San Fernando to Siparia, San Fernando to Pinal, San Fernando to Point, San Fernando to Granville, San Fernando to Columbus Bay, those places, that's quite a journey. That's quite a journey. You think like, okay, so we reach south, we reach Sando, this is south. Or even worse yet, someone tells you, all right, we reach Marabella, so this is south. And you're like, right, good. But you're really going St. Mary's Moruga and you find out, hey, south have a lot of south to south, boy. The anywhere past Shogunas is south. Nah, I disagree. Anywhere past Couva is south. Like Claxton Bay is central south. I'd call Claxton Bay south, but right there is the border. That Claxton Bay right there. It's like going on an outing. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You have to be ready. The part that always got me was the expectation that San Fernando is south, so we reach south in 45 minutes. But then we still have an hour and a half again of driving to reach where we're going in south. How could I reach south in 45 minutes and then spend an hour and a half still driving in south to reach where I'm going in south? What is going on? After you pass the lighthouse, that's it. Being from town, Couva is part of Shoguana. Wow. These reprehensible comments. Couva is part of Sir, come on now. Now, you see, Mr. Fuad, I think being someone that went up as an MP, you should be able to outline these things better for these people. How could you call Couva? Couva has Couva South and Couva North. Big man, Couva has 2 whole constituencies. How you could bunch that in with Shoguanas? And Shoguanas has Shoguanas East and Shoguanas West, 2 whole constituencies by itself. What are you talking about? Couva could never be Shoguanas. Listen, those might be fighting words in the wrong place, sir. How Couva will be Shoguanas? Bunch them in together. Ridiculous. The shopping, the commerce. The commerce in Shoguanas is different from the commerce in Couva. The vibe of Shoguanas is different from the vibe of Couva. Shoguanas have a Shoguanas vibe. Couva have a nearly south vibe. More south vibe. Couva is a ghost town by the time 5 o'clock. Shoguanas, well, you have to wait till 6 o'clock for it to be a ghost town. Shoguanas is the place of deals. If you have $600 and you want to get maximum distance, you go Shoguanas because somebody you could get a deal. Trust me, somebody in Shoguanas have that deal somewhere around for you. Couva, there's nothing of the such. You know what you're going for in Couva, or you don't go to Couva. You don't go Couva to experiment and window shop. I wonder what I'd find in Couva. You know what you're going to find in Couva. A couple banks, the ID card office or something like that. Listen, you're looking to get me upset. Shoguanas only close to San Fernando because of the highway. Good point. Very good point. For example, I've realized recently that extended bit of highway coming closer to Pinal has made the journey from San Fernando to Pinal so much easier and faster. San Fernando to Pinal starts to feel nearly like Chaguanas to Couva. It starts to feel much closer. The highway has a lot to do with it, but that Couva Chaguan, that's like the people, those north and west people who call Chagaramas. Like, no, Chag is Chaguanas. CHAG is short for Chaguanas. And I will have no arguments about it. Careful, I'll block all you. All right. My voice is still on the recovery after those biological weapons did what they did after those schools reopened. I say homeschool them all. And let's forget about this whole group project that is public education. Return abort. It's just no. They're spreading their sick far and wide. No, let's not. You sounding like a central man, but of course, only the best. Where you are at the heart of the country. You are at the center of it all. You see, centrality is so important. We are at the heart of the country. We could wake up and go to South Park, or wake up and go to Movie Town up in Port of Spain. We know our cardinal points. We understand that past the lighthouse isn't south, but we also understand that south could be a little far, and that when south people talking about now we right there, that the kind of mama guy in here, central is where it's at. To be very honest with you, that's just the reality. Central is where it's at. Thought you was in North, man. No. And you know something, something that always confused me, at least when it came to the whole school zoning business. We don't understand where north, east, and west is, because the north, when people talk about north, they're really talking about Port of Spain and environs. People talk about east and then talking about Barataria. Like, have you ever looked at the map of Trinidad and Tobago? Barataria is not east. How could you talk about Tunapuna as east? That is not east of Trinidad and Tobago. That is north central. East-west people do not understand cardinal points. I have come to that conclusion. The whole north, east, west, south of Trinidad business is someone stood up at the lighthouse in Port of Spain, and anyone to the north of them at that point was north, anyone to the south of them at that point was south, anyone to the east of them at that point was east, and anyone to the west of them was west. That's how they decided east, west, north, south in Trinidad, because it really doesn't make sense. I always remember as a youth, I liked geography, and I understood my cardinal points from a young fellow, and I looked at the map of Trinidad, and I was always wondering, but what are these people talking about when they say east and talking about Tunapuna? That is not in the east. How come East Trinidad never produced a PM? Oh, look at Bacchanal. How come East Trinidad never produced a PM? I don't know. Eastmen will have to answer to that. Eastmen would have to answer for that. I would know. Of course you would, Mr. Curtis Jordan. My life stick when you read my comment about Northman. Way low blueberry. Yeah, I find that one was low. I find that was unnecessarily low. And to be very honest, I never even thought about it that way. No comment. Eastmen, all you would have to defend that all on your own. I from the East, but it's true. All right. That is all I have for now, folks. It was nice. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. 0.5 for people from town. Yeah. I hope it was nice, or at least we found out some good stuff and had a nice discussion. And I will see you again tomorrow for the next Mindful Live, where we'll do this all again. And for those who wonder where you can find the lives after they go bye-bye here, go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube, and you can find all the rest of the lives there, see what we talk about. The discussions do go pretty well, you know, quite often. They are healthy. So you can go over there, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button also when you're leaving wherever you are, hit that like button, make sure the algorithm knows this is good, some good stuff, and I will see you again tomorrow. Yes, Nisi, I am going. We are not having the mindful discussion after on TikTok here. My voice is still in the recovery stage, as I was pointing out from those critters. Laters, everyone. It was nice. Tomorrow.